Hey, aloha to our candidates, our directors, and our guests. I'm Greg Misakian, president of Kokua Council. We want to welcome everyone to today's Kokua Council Candidate Forum. Today, we welcome back Tina Nakata Grandinetti and Corinne Solomon, who are the candidates competing to be the next State House District 20 representative. We had an opportunity to meet both of them during the primary election cycle, along with other candidates in their race. The incumbent, Representative Burt Kobayashi, is not running for re-election, so whoever wins this seat will be a freshman legislator who will have the residents of District 20 and throughout Hawaii watching closely to see what she will do. We are again looking forward to learning more about the candidates and their positions on the many important issues that impact State House District 20 and Hawaii. Lila Mower, the former president of Kokua Council and current president emerita, will be the moderator today. I introduce Lila, who will begin the candidate forum.
Aloha and mahalo for joining us. I'm Lila Mower, and I serve as today's moderator. Before the primary election, we met Corinne, Tina, and other candidates for the seat of state representative of District 20, which includes Leahi, Wailai, Kamuki, and Kapahulu. Thus, Corinne and Tina have had opportunities to compare their experiences and proposals. Starting with Corinne. Please tell us about yourself, then expound upon the differences between the two of you that are important to your district.
Thank you, Lila. Thank you, everybody, for giving us this opportunity once again to talk a little bit about ourselves and our district. My background is in healthcare. I am a clinical pharmacist, so I've worked in hospitals across the island of Oahu. I met my husband about 20 years ago at Tripler, and we have a daughter at Waikiki Elementary. I have some teaching experience. I've taught lots of nurses, and I've taught pharmacology classes at KCC. So that's a little bit about my background. I think actually Tina and I have a lot of the same interests in helping Hawaii and the same priorities. We just have a different way of looking at things and a different way of addressing things. I think I'm really, really focused on trying to reduce the cost of living through legislative methods. And also, I really just want to be a voice for our community for District 20 and focus on the issues that are high priority for our residents in our district. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tina, your response, please.
Aloha, my name is Tina Nakata Grandinetti. I was born and raised here on Oahu, and I currently work as a postdoctoral fellow in housing policy at a National Policy Institute. Prior to that, I was working as chief of staff for Representative Amy Peruso. And I also have a background of community organizing. I was involved with the struggle to shut down Red Hill. I'm a dues-paying member of the Honolulu Tenants Union and worked with them to help organize renters who are being evicted from the Kapiolani Village apartments. I think that kind of speaks to some of the differences that kind of set me apart, particularly my background in community organizing. I think that reflects my commitment to not just engaging, not just engaging at the policy level, but really on the ground with members of our community who are most impacted by the issues we're facing. And I also think that my policy expertise in our housing crisis is something that sets me apart. Housing has been kind of the defining issue of my generation of local kids, the question of whether we're going to be able to afford to stay here and whether we're going to be able to raise our families here has really shaped how we move through our lives on this island. So I've really committed my professional life to understanding our crisis and learning how we can confront it by looking to best practices from cities and states across the country.
Well, hello, Tina. All right, Tina, you'll take the next question. And actually, what you just said was a nice lead into it. One of the most pressing issues for the state is the lack of affordable housing. Senator Chang's district overlaps your House district. He's been a proponent of social housing, suggesting that the government underwrite the construction of residentials, which must remain affordable. What are your thoughts about his ideas?
Thank you. I think Senator Chang's commitment to the idea of social housing is really important. There are some things that I take issue with, particularly his focus on large-scale high-rise development. But I do feel really passionately that social housing is a way that we can kind of counter the impacts of the global real estate market in Hawaii. And what I mean by that is not just government facilitated production of housing, but policies that put the ownership of housing in the hands of the community, whether that's through the state or through tenant ownership models or through community ownership models. And so where I think Senator Chang's policy is a good policy ideas are a good jumping off point is if we think about how can we start to decommodify our housing market and create a pool of permanently affordable and community-owned housing that is accessible to local people. And that doesn't have to look solely like the Aloha Homes plan, which, you know, advocates for 64,000 units of social housing produced by the state. It can also look like supporting community land trusts or creating a land bank to help buy up, you know, housing that could be refurbished and then taken over by community organizations who are more responsive to the needs of their members and the communities that they work in.
Thank you very much. Corinne, you're next.
Thank you. Every state to some extent has some government-initiated, government-controlled social housing. So I think that's something that we definitely need to expand upon. But my overall general feeling is that the private sector is much more capable of doing things efficiently than the government. And what I think we should do is we should find a way to get ourselves out from under the Jones Act, which is the maritime law that restricts shipping to Hawaii from American-built ships coming from American-built ports. Because if we get out from under the Jones Act, we can reduce the cost of construction for housing by up to 30%. So that's a big chunk that we can do right there to make housing more affordable. I also think we really need to expand upon building housing on transit-oriented lines, such as the rail, so that people don't have to rely on their own cars and transportation for housing. So I do commend the idea, and I would have to look more at the specific policy of what he's doing, but I don't think it is a perfect solution for our housing crisis. I think we need to focus on lowering the cost of construction first.
Thank you, Corinne. All right. The next question is yours, Corinne. What are your thoughts about a cap on rent or other housing subsidies? And if you support housing subsidies, what kind?
I do support housing subsidies for low-income tenants. I think there are some good programs that we have that we can look on strengthening. I do not support a cap on rents. I think that can backfire. I think you'll have people who are locked into housing that will never leave, and then, you know, they won't want to move up, and that causes a filtering problem where you have people stuck in houses, and even if they have too much space, they're not going to leave. And then there's, you know, that's a unit that another family could move into. And I think that landlords can try and get ahead of rental caps by once they have a tenant leave, they can increase the rent. It's not quite what I'm trying to say. I'm like Greg, I didn't have very much sleep either. So let me just wrap it up and say that I really don't think rental caps are the way to go. I really think lowering the cost of living and the cost of construction is the way to go. And if my constituents want more details on those thoughts after I've had a better sleep, I'm very happy to get back to them on that.
Thank you, Corinne. All right, Tina?
I think that lowering the cost of housing for the nearly 50% of Hawaii households who rent is one of the most effective ways to meaningfully lower the cost of living in Hawaii. So I do support a cap on rents. We call it rent stabilization. I understand that that's a really complicated issue for a lot of people. It's a very heavy political lift. But I think that it's been, it's being adopted by cities and states across the country because we know that the rent is just too high. There are things we can do kind of maybe to ease our way into the idea. There's, rent stabilization, which typically sets the allowable rent caps at a pretty low level per year. And there's also a conversation we can have around anti-gouging measures, which set the cap much higher and only prevent the most egregious rent increases. So, they prevent landlords from gouging their tenants or kicking them out by increasing the rent at a really unconscionable rate. So I think that's actually really important for us to start talking about. I know that it's, a conversation where we need to bring in landlords. We want to make sure our mom and pop landlords who are doing the right thing feel comfortable with what we're doing, but we also have to be really serious about the fact that if 48% of Hawaii households rent, the best way that we can start to reshape our housing crisis, our housing market, is by addressing their needs directly. I also support housing subsidies, but I think that I'm really excited about conversations at the federal level where we're looking at moving away from things like Section 8, where the check gets sent to the landlord, and instead give the tenants that money directly to prevent source of income discrimination.
Thank you very much. All right, this next question goes to Tina. First, what are your thoughts about the proposed empty homes tax that is being considered by the city and county? Do you have suggestions that will make housing more affordable and accessible?
I support a empty homes tax. I think it's, pretty reasonable policy that just reemphasizes that housing should be put to use as shelter to meet people's basic needs. But I feel like we should be realistic about the role that the tax would play in addressing our housing crisis. I don't think that it is a silver bullet. I think it's more of a revenue generator and kind of like a disincentive for speculation, but I don't think that that's sort of starting at the ground level and meeting the needs of, directly meeting the needs of low income households. But I would support it. I think the most meaningful way we can disincentivize speculation and people who use our homes as empty shells for investment is by restructuring our property taxes, which is a much bigger conversation. So in any case, I think the empty homes tax is a good place to start. As for other suggestions about what could make housing more available and accessible, I'm really excited. I think I've mentioned this in previous answers, but I'm really excited about looking at really community-centered solutions. I'm excited by the work that the Lahaina Community Land Trust is doing. Those are fire survivors who are trying to prevent displacement in the aftermath of the fire by creating a land trust where folks who want to sell their land can sell it to this trust, and it'll be kept affordable in perpetuity, and it'll serve the needs of that community. So I would love to see that scaled up, and I would love to see state support for models like that.
Thank you. Corinne, your response, please.
Well, I do not support the empty homes tax. Number one, I think it would be difficult to monitor and to enforce. Number two, I don't think for people who own expensive properties here in Hawaii, the tax is going to dissuade them from keeping that home. I don't think it's a solution to freeing up that home to renters or to selling to local families. It's a pretty high tax, so it would generate some revenue, but I don't think that's the solution on how to generate revenue for the state. And I think that the suggestions that I would give to make housing more accessible still goes back to lowering the cost of living, lowering the cost of construction. I do like the bill that was just passed to convert empty commercial buildings into residential units, so I'm pretty excited about that. And again, building and building higher density and building along transit routes is a good thing. So when I researched the empty homes tax, I didn't see any number on how many staff and how much it would cost to monitor and enforce that. So that is a big concern of mine with that bill.
Thank you very much. All right, the next question goes first to Corinne. In June, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of laws that ban people from sleeping in public places, making it easier for communities to address the problem of homeless sleeping and living on the streets and in parks. What do you think of this federal decision and its impact on your community?
Sure that we've implemented the passage of that law here in Hawaii. I do know that if you sweep people out from where they are and they lose all their belongings, that really doesn't help. And then often they come back the next day, except they don't have anything that they've gathered to live, on the streets with them. I think one of the ways we have to address homelessness is we have to really focus on increasing access to mental health. And we need to look at our homeless population and kind of whittle it down so that we can prioritize getting kupuna and families into homes and people that are on wait lists for Hawaiian homelands, and have the people who are veterans who are homeless get support from the veterans associations, and have the people who are here from out of state work with their home states to send them back, so that we can really see what we have to deal with as far as our own population here and how we can best help them without having to help people from other states and other communities.
Thank you very much, Corinne. Tina?
I think that the Supreme Court ruling was really inhumane, and I feel very passionately that criminalizing people experiencing homelessness is cruel and irresponsible and ineffective. If you've ever seen the aftermath or seen a sweep conducted or been part of a cleanup for the aftermath of a sweep, it's literally people's lives getting wiped away, and it happens on a regular basis. And like Corinne said, their identification gets taken away. The little that they have to kind of keep them going, is taken from them. And I think that's a real reflection of a failure by the state to provide for its people, and then making them or punishing them for that failure instead of trying to correct it. So I am really disappointed by that ruling. And like Corinne, I agree with Corinne that the best way that we can address the problem of homelessness in our district is by increasing our access to mental health and behavioral health and medical care for folks who are experiencing homelessness, lowering the cost of housing, and implementing housing first policies that put people in homes before kind of demanding things of them, because we know that the best way to get back on your feet is to have a roof over your head.
Thank you very much. All right, Tina, the next question is yours. The state's Office of Planning and Sustainable Development reported new strategies to raise funds for infrastructure improvement and development. What do you think of these strategies, which include expanding the capacity of general excise taxes and increasing the cap on the transient accommodation tax?
I haven't looked into that report yet, but just my immediate reaction to the question is that yes, we need a lot more public investment for infrastructure improvement and development, particularly in the face of climate change and climate preparedness. I think that those public investments should be made through an equity lens. So general excise taxes are one of the most regressive elements of our tax system. They impact low-income folks at the same kind of level as our wealthiest. And so I would be, or it's expanding the capacity of general excise tax. Sorry, I'm just rereading the question again. So I would just be mindful of making sure that the costs of those public investments are not do not place the highest burden on the folks who are struggling the most. I do support increasing the cap on the transient accommodation tax. We need to make our economy more diversified and sustainable. And in the meantime, we should make our tourism industry more accountable to the people who live here. And I think that that's one good way to do that.
Thank you very much. Corinne, your response, please.
I am actually also not familiar with this report, but I wrote it down so that I could look it up later. I don't think we should raise the GET, and I don't think we should increase the cap on the transient accommodation tax. I think we need to look at ways the federal government can help us with our infrastructure issues. And part of my campaign is I will not support any legislation that increases the cost of living for my residents. So I think we need to instead of relying on tourists to pay for things through their transient accommodation tax, I think we need to increase opportunities for tourists to perhaps do ag tourism. I think it's what it's called. And we need to increase the programs that the programs that will diversify our economy, like investing in STEM and the film industry, ways that we can increase our GDP instead of taxing residents and taxing visitors.
Thank you very much. All right. The next question goes to Corinne, and I'll give you a moment to read it as I read it. Your district has many older neighborhoods that lack sidewalks, and some streets aren't wide enough for roadside parking and two-lane traffic. But there are efforts to provide more housing by increasing density. The Oahu Vision Zero Plan is a county roadmap for greater street safety, supported by partial funding from the federal government. Lahaina has taught us the value of wider streets and greater ingress, egress. What are your thoughts regarding these somewhat incompatible visions?
So a hot topic in our district lately has been sidewalks and parking. And if you walk around Kaimuki, Kapuhulu, you'll see that there's absolutely no street parking anywhere on several streets. The streets are very narrow. And I know it's not within the county's capacity to do a street by street regulation on increasing density, but I almost feel like that's what we need here, because you have districts that have such variations in their density. And I think District 20 is one of those. So I honestly don't see how we're going to increase sidewalks without taking away increase road length without affecting road width without reflecting the loss of parking or compensating for the loss of parking. And adding sidewalks is really important. But I think if we're going to look at the federal funding to do that, we have to also take into consideration that they might want us to add bike lanes, things that aren't possible in these narrow streets. So we have learned a lot from what Lahaina is going through, and I'll have to research this some more to see if we can actually achieve better sidewalks in this district. But right now, from what I've been told, it's been 40 years since we've had an improvement in sidewalks in District 20. So it's a big problem.
Thank you. Tina, your response, please.
For me, I think the answer to that contradiction is greater investment in public transportation. We can address, gently densifying our neighborhoods if we simultaneously invest in making our neighborhoods more walkable and accessible. We had a conversation at the neighborhood board the other day around traffic congestion at Liho Elementary School, that there's, hour-and-a-half long waits for folks to pick up their kids. The number of kids at the school hasn't increased. It's the number of parents who no longer feel safe having their kids walk to school. And so there are, questions you can ask around traffic mitigation and drop-off points, but the real core of the issue is that people don't feel safe walking. And I think that, there are questions about emergency access and, natural disaster preparedness. But we don't, in our district, we don't have the issue of a one way in, one way out kind of situation. And so I think that increasing walkability and pedestrian safety is sort of the key component of our neighborhood being safer on an everyday basis. And there are certain parts of our district, like along Diamond Head Drive, where that question is really important. But I think even there, you can see like congestion happens when our cyclists and runners and surfers and cars are all using that one road without space for everyone to use that road safely. So I think, yeah, easy answer is the best way we can address this issue is by increasing access to public transportation and walkability and investing in pedestrian safety. And I'm really excited about complete streets projects and safe routes to school projects that we can implement in our district.
Thank you. All right, I think you'll appreciate the next question because it's short. This goes to Tina first. What are your thoughts regarding Ala Pono, the proposed bridge across the Ala Wai?
Oh, that one. I live on the Kapahulu side of our district, so I always walk around the Ala Wai and have attended one of the meetings for the pedestrian bridge. I think, I'm not at all opposed to a pedestrian bridge that could help workers access Waikiki and go to their jobs at the hotels, or, just kind of promote multimodal transit between Waikiki and our district. But the current plan to me is like really outrageous. It's like a huge public spending project for something that I don't necessarily serves the public good. Like 18-story, I don't know what you call it, like the high point of the bridge. And it doesn't seem at all responsive to what people want for their neighborhood. I think in my mind, it's kind of trying to turn that project into like a tourism attraction or a landmark rather than an actual meaningful piece of infrastructure for our neighborhood. So short answer, I would support a pedestrian bridge that'll help people get from one side to another. I don't support this kind of like bloated project that has faced a lot of community opposition.
Thank you, Tina. Corinne, your answer, please.
So I was watching some old neighborhood board meetings that had to do with this pedestrian bridge, and it seemed like the neighbors had wanted a moderate bridge. So I'm not sure how we went from a moderate bridge to a 23-story structure that's costing a ton of money. What I would like to see happen is I would like to see this halted and go back to the drawing board with more support and input from the community to see where we can get back to something that's more moderate. We don't really have the resources to spend on something that, like Tina mentioned, is probably going to be more of a tourist attraction than something that is just a bare bones kind of, can be beautiful, but bare bones bridge that we need for our people here. Those are my thoughts on the bridge.
Thank you very much. All right, Corinne, the next question is yours, and it is equally short as the prior question. What are your thoughts regarding the Ala Wai flood risk management plan?
So it's a very expensive plan, and I commend the plan to try and make Ala Wai flood proof. I don't know where we're going to get the money to do it. I think we do need to look at the impacts of climate change and the flooding and see how we can address this. I don't know that we can reach the scale of the project though for the amount of funding that it's going to require. So I think with this, we need to start small and do what we can to get it going. But I think this is a case of having an ideology that is not possible with the funds that we have to support it. So that's another one that's difficult.
Thank you very much. All right, Tina, your response.
For me, the current management plan is really reflective of this kind of mentality that we fortify ourselves against our environment instead of working with our environment. And I think that that's sort of how we ended up with the Ala Wai in the first place. It was dredging our entire ecosystem to make way for a certain type of development. And then we're kind of replicating that same mentality as we brace ourselves for climate change, instead of turning to the knowledge that Native Hawaiians have, for instance, over about how to work with our watersheds and our environment to strengthen our communities instead. So I know that there are plenty of community organizations that have not only opposed the current plan, but tried to offer solutions that, include restoring our streams and watersheds and using our natural ecosystem to kind of mitigate floods, because that's what they have done. That's what they've always done. And so it's more a question of taking care of them. And so it's really frustrating to me to see that U.S. Army Corps of Engineer kind of repeating its mistakes twice. And I really hope that there's still room for meaningful community engagement and meaningful engagement with our Indigenous knowledge systems as we move forward into, an uncertain climate future.
Thank you very much. All right. Let's see. We start with Tina on this one. What are your thoughts about the plan to move the primary urban center development to East Honolulu?
This one is complicated for me because I feel that our neighborhoods need to kind of be ready for change and embrace it as a positive thing. But I think that the only way to do that is to make sure that our communities feel heard. So for me, our neighborhoods are all really important to us. And we also know that suburban neighborhoods have been built in ways that have been quite isolating for families, that have made us really car dependent. They also are, quieter and sort of more enjoyable to live in. So it's a balance. But I think that if we really center participatory planning and meaningful community engagement as we shape our primary urban center development plan, then we can sort of embrace walkability and the benefits of urban life, while also maintaining the sense of character and place that make our communities really special. But I think that the key issue there is participation and meaningful engagement.
Thank you. Corinne, your answer, please.
So this is another one that I wanted to go to the planning meetings for, or the community input meetings, and I was unable to attend those. So I don't have a solid answer on this because I don't know what the community has said at those meetings regarding this. So this is one of the things where I'm going to have to do some more research and get back to you.
Thank you very much. All right. The next question comes from Doug.
Okay, yeah, thanks for doing this, guys. During the COVID lockdown, a lot of us realized that Hawaii is seriously over-touristed and called for legislations to manage tourism rather than just blindly promote it. Is limiting and managing tourism a priority for you, or is tourism still the goose that lays the golden egg?
There was a study that came out a few months ago that showed that Hawaii is the most over-touristed state in the country and one of the top over-touristed places in the world. We have sold Hawaii as a tourist destination, so I don't think we're going to get away from that. I think we have to balance the needs of the community and the state with keeping the money that we get from tourism, because it's not going to go away. It's not going to go anywhere. And I think we do need to do more to manage it. I like what we've done with the park systems of making reservations. I think that there's more that we can do if we especially look at how other places like Venice and Spain are handling all their tourists, because it's making residents, pretty upset that they have to adjust their lives to benefit tourists and tourism. So I think one way we can strengthen our own residents is by promoting our economy that doesn't involve tourism, like sustainable agriculture And I had mentioned STEM earlier, investing in more healthcare resources so that locals have jobs that aren't reliant on tourism. But I don't think we're ever going to get away from tourism because, you know, that's what we've sold Hawaii as, is a tourist destination.
Thank you very much, Tina.
Sorry, thanks. I think there's a lot we can do to move away from our dependence on tourism. We have sold Hawaii as a tourism destination, and we've spent a lot of money to do that. You know, that didn't happen by mistake. We've consistently spent public funds to market Hawaii rather than manage how our tourism market interacts with the rest of our economy. And so I think that I agree that we need to invest in other industries, but I think that money can come directly from the money that we have historically spent on marketing Hawaii to tourists. I also think that part of managing over tourism is kind of beginning to pry its like fingers away from like our residents' essential needs. Housing is one of them. So I'm really excited about the work that Lahaina Strong did to push through the bill enabling counties to phase out short-term rentals. And I'm really interested to see how that plays out on Maui County with the Minatoia exception. You know, that is a case study in how over-tourism doesn't just mean that there are too many people on our beaches. It means that our entire economy is shaped around the needs of people who don't live here. Our entire housing market becomes eaten up by people who are using it as a vacation rather than a roof over their heads. So those are the kinds of like really big questions that we need to be looking at, not just how to make sure that tourists are engaging respectfully at the beach and that they're respecting our environments, but like how do we actually meaningfully take back power from an exploitative industry and make sure that we are meeting the needs of our local people.
Thank you very much. All right, the next question comes from Dawn.
The original purpose of government was to keep its populace safe. Crime and corruption appear to be rampant and without solution. Do we have enough policing ability to curb crime? And I guess if we don't, doesn't corruption affect the budget with funds being funneled into the wrong pockets?
The question first goes to Tina.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand the last part of the question. Doesn't corruption? Okay, I think that's like two-part question. It's complicated because there are lots of types of crime, you know, violent crime, property crime, and then this like deeper corruption that is, yeah, a huge part of how our government operates. I think that do we have enough policing ability to curb crime? That's also a question of where we put our priorities and how we invest in solutions. So I firmly believe that the best way to address crime is by addressing poverty. And the best way to address poverty is by investing in our social welfare system and in our education system, in our social safety net, so that people feel cared for and don't turn to crime to kind of, you know, meet their needs. The corruption question, doesn't corruption affect the budget with funds being funneled into the wrong pockets? Absolutely. And so I think that my solution to that is by making that we need to make meaningful reforms to the way politics works. I think Corinne and I have both talked about our support for ending pay-to-play donations, which do impact our budget. You know, public spending ends up going to the people who are making the highest contributions to people's campaign funds instead of the people who can do the best job at the most effective rate. So I would support meaningful changes like that. But yeah, on a broad level, I would generally choose to invest public funding in social services and kind of our broader community welfare than just.
So I'll answer the second part first. Not only do we have corruption that's takes money away from the state that could be spent on other things, we have a lot of government waste and inefficiency. So we need to tackle both government waste, inefficiency, and corruption to really clean up what's going on. We can do that through audits. We can do that through maybe through term limits. We can do that through changing the power structure at the legislature, making things more transparent. So that is definitely something that is something that interests me as a priority to address. And second of all, we are the police departments are severely short-staffed. They have a problem with retention and recruitment. So I think we need to support their needs and help them retain and recruit people. And if that means increasing their salaries, then we need to find a way to do that too. And again, for me, everything goes back to cost of living. If our police officers aren't making enough to live on the salaries that they have, and housing is too expensive and groceries are too expensive and they pay too much in taxes, then not only do we need to work with the police department to help them with the retention and recruitment, but we need to lower the cost of living so that their money goes farther.
Thank you very much. All right, the next question comes from Dale and goes to Corinne first.
Good morning. Thank you for being with us today. And will you be willing to write a bill for a policy requiring people submitting testimony on proposed legislation to declare conflicts of interest and to speak truthfully to the best of their knowledge? Thank you.
Well, you know, I've seen bills that have 738 pages worth of testimony, and I don't know how we would vet that, but I do like your line of thinking there. I think that is something that we need to expect from people, is to be honest and to declare conflicts of interest. I know one thing that is required when you're testifying on behalf of a committee or a business is, I think you need to put that on your testimony. So I like this in theory, but again, I don't know how it's something that we could monitor and enforce. I think we do need to strengthen the laws around conflicts of interest reporting. And I think for legislation, we need to require who is submitting the bill on whose behalf. So a lot of times you see bills come through that say per request of another party. And I think that needs to go away, and we need to change that law. But yeah, that's an interesting concept.
Thank you very much. Tina?
Yeah, I agree. I think that idea kind of speaks to this issue of the power of lobbyists. And so I think I would be more interested in strengthening reporting requirements for lobbying activities. You know, a lot of, like, when people submit individual testimony, conflicts of interest are less important because, like Corinne said, there can be dozens, and it's the sort of organizational testimony and the behind the scenes lobbying where the real conflict of interest and abuse of power occurs. So I appreciate the intent of that idea, and I think that there's a way that we can sort of meet that intent more effectively by strengthening reporting for lobbying activities, enforcing stricter disclosure requirements on lobbyists, and making sure that the public knows the lobbyists that are in and out of the building every single day, and who they're seeing, and, you know, related to that, how much money they're donating to people's campaign coffers.
Thank you. All right, Tina, you take this question next. Gordon Ito, the state's insurance commissioner, is said to have plans to move on to the federal level, and there's talk that Scott Saiki will replace him as insurance commissioner. What will you do to ensure that all important agency and department positions have the right leadership?
Oh, that's a really important question, and one that I think will be a really big learning curve for me as a legislator. You know, there's a lot that community advocates do in their work on the ground. And there's a lot that also legislators and community advocates don't always understand about the internal workings of a department or agency. And that's a lot of times where a good idea can become less good in its implementation. And so I think it's really, really important that we meaningfully address that the folks who are making decisions at the agency and department level are the best folks for the job, and that their employees, that they are able to attract and retain capable employees. So I think my sort of 101 answer is that I would seek input from the folks working in those departments and agencies. You know, we see during appointment processes and stuff, a lot of people come to testify, and I think their voices are not always heard. So again, I appreciate this question and feel like I'll have a lot to learn about how to actually make sure that I do the right thing in that spot.
Thank you. Corinne?
So one of the issues I see with how Hawaii is run is in our state, we do a lot of appointments as opposed to a lot of elections. And since we are such an appointment heavy state, that's where it's really important that we have a balanced government, and we have a very lopsided government. So we don't have a lot of diversity of party. You know, I think for any state, whether it's heavily blue or heavily red, I don't think that's healthy for the people of that state. So one way to address this, I think, honestly, would be to elect more Republicans so that we have a more balanced input onto these appointments. And I would like to see us go away from having so many appointments and change more to a process of elections. But that is a really interesting question.
Thank you. All right, Corinne, you'll take the next question, and it's rather long, so please follow along with me via the chat. It has been noticed that the House leadership selects the committee chairs who have had powerful influence on proposed legislation. It's also been noted that some legislators believe that they were assigned leadership positions on certain committees because the issues that the committee confronts will not hurt that legislator's electability. Thus, and this is provided only as an example, you may have a legislator from an urban community chair a committee that deals with agriculture, or a legislator from a rural community who chairs a committee that deals with condominiums. What are your thoughts about these arrangements?
So I had this novel idea, and I actually put it in my Civil Beat questionnaire. And what I think we need is, term limits for committee chairs. I think there's too much power concentrated in the chair. I think that the committee members also need to have more power than what they have. It's a very, very lopsided situation, again, just like with the right and the left and the blue and the red. As far as the second part of the question, I think part of it is if you have a passion for something, but it's not reflective of your community, I think you can still serve your community and still make legislation that has to do with your passion. So for instance, we are a very urban district here, but my personal passion is agriculture and aquaculture lately. I've been really interested in how we could support the aquaculture and the agriculture industries. So for me, I would be honored to sit on the agriculture committee, even though it doesn't effectively direct my district, but it does affect the well-being and the economy of the state as a whole. So I'm hoping that the appointments that are made in honesty and reflect people's interests and their passions, and that people who are elected to the legislature still put their community first, but are able to serve the state overall.
Thank you. Tina, your response, please.
Yeah, for me, you know, it's really important to remember that we sort of exist beyond our boundary or district boundaries, and that issues intersect all of our districts in really important ways. So I have less of a problem with the examples that were given in the question, and more of a problem with the unilateral power that chairs kind of have. And I think that there are ways that we can address that by democratizing the process around hearing agendas, you know, maybe challenging the idea that so many of our bills that don't deal with money should all go through the finance committees as kind of like the terminal committee assignment. And then I think that there's another question of a cultural shift. Right now, the culture in our legislature is that committee chairs should sort of be largely unchallenged by their committee members. And I think that that is where the real detriment to the democratic process happens, because, you know, if you have a committee or agriculture chair who lives in an urban district, but many members who live in rural districts, we should have them all working together and really like sharing discourse to make sure that the bills that they pass and the measures that they propose are the most effective. And the only way you can do that is if you start to shift a culture where that kind of conversation is acceptable and welcomed. And so that is something that I would be really invested in trying to do with my freshman class. Like, you know, we should all want to be challenged so that the policies we implement are at their very strongest.
Thank you very much. All right. So Tina, you'll take this next question first. Last month, Governor Green issued an emergency proclamation to stabilize the condominium insurance market. It's alleged that the insurance commissioner's office has not shielded the residents of Hawaii from unaffordable and possibly predatory property insurance rate increases, putting increasingly more owners at risk of having to sell or lose their homes. What do you suggest to ameliorate the condo insurance crisis, which now has bled into other casualty insurance, affecting other residential and commercial properties, and even auto insurance?
This is a huge question, and one that I know a lot of states are struggling with, where I don't think any of them have come up with like a really adequate answer yet. I think that a really important place to start is by working with our federal delegation to make sure that insurance markets are regulated more strongly by the federal government, because this isn't just a Hawaii issue. You know, this is an intensifying issue across the country, and it's going to get more and more intense as climate change intensifies. I read an article that said we are marching rapidly towards an uninsurable future. And so it's going to take a lot of work to figure out how we reshape the market to actually meet the needs of the people. And I think that some like shorter term measures we could look into are stabilizing our insurance market by requiring that insurers base any rate increases on actual data, you know, so we have more transparency around the kinds of risk assessments that they do. We can also look to states like California and Kentucky and Minnesota that are requiring insurers to lower the rates for property owners who are investing in making their properties more resilient to natural disasters. But, you know, those are smaller scale things. And then I think the sort of other solution on the table is other kind of short-term step is establishing a state-backed high-risk pool, which is really complicated and hasn't really worked out very well in some states, but has at least kind of tided people over and met this immediate gap. But yeah, I personally want to get on the housing committee, and so I think that this is going to be a huge issue.
You can finish your statement.
One other thing I would say is that we're continually building condos before we address this question. So I feel like that's something that we should keep in mind as we, you know, reshape our urban core.
So yeah, this isn't just a Hawaii issue. This is a nationwide issue, especially in places that are impacted by natural disasters and climate change, like Florida and like Hawaii, California as well. I did read some report that said this gentleman says he thinks we're at the peak of this issue. So I don't want to provide false hope, but I'm hoping that we are at the peak and things are going to start to normalize. I think one of the ways that we can lower the insurance for the condos is the insurance against hurricanes and natural disasters is all partly based on the cost to rebuild. And again, going back to the Jones Act, if we can get the federal government to get us out from under the Jones Act and we can make the cost to rebuild cheaper, then that should bring down the insurance rates. Another thing that condo associations and owners face is a big lag time in trying to do repairs. And the more you wait to try and get your repairs done through the permitting process, the higher the cost of those repairs can go up. So that goes back to the county level of how do we reduce the time it takes to get a permit to do repairs on condos. And then another thing that we need to look at is how do we get more banks to offer loans for condos, because there's a lot of condos that can't be sold because they're underinsured, and there aren't banks that are going to cover the mortgage for these people who are trying to buy condos. So yeah, it is a very complicated issue. I'm continuing to read and study and learn more about this. And I do hope that this gentleman was correct when he said he thinks we're at the peak, but more needs to be done to try and keep people in their homes and who are faced with these huge condo fees.
Thank you very much, Corinne. Mahalo, candidates. We're nearing the end of our forum, so please take up to 2 minutes to make your closing statement. We'll start with Corinne, and after Tina, will be followed by Kokua Council's President Greg Misakian for his closing statement. So Corinne, please go ahead.
Well, I want to thank the Kokua Council once again for giving us this opportunity to share our views on some of these very important and challenging questions sometimes. It shows me that even though I have the passion to serve our community, I still have a lot to learn, especially on some of the things that were brought up today. There's one of my favorite Hawaiian proverbs, which is all wisdom is not taught under one halau. So I take that to heart, and I'm humbled by the questions, and I hope that I can serve my community well if I'm elected and research all the issues more in depth that affect them very much. And as far as going back to my passion for agriculture, I do have a seed giveaway that I'm doing. So if you're watching from our community and you would like to have some of my seeds, please send me an email and I can drop some by at your house. I'm trying to get a garden anywhere that I can, even if you want to just grow in your windowsill. So you can reach me at solomonforhawaii@gmail.com. And I have a bunch of seeds from UH that I'm giving away. Also, I really want to drive our district to try and get the highest voter turnout in the state. So please turn in your ballot when you get it. Ask your friends and family to vote. Doesn't matter who you're voting for. We just want you to have your voice be heard. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Corinne. Tina, your closing statement, please.
Thank you so much. I'm really blown away by the questions, how in-depth they are and how reflective they are of the issues that our district is currently facing. So thank you so much for such a comprehensive forum. I think I'm reflecting because we covered so much about like the common threads that emerged in, the challenges ahead. And for me, what stands out is that each of the questions that we were asked speak to like these much deeper problems that we're currently confronting. Condo insurance is a reflection of climate change. Crime is a reflection of like a deep disinvestment in the well-being of our community. And so I think I want to close by just saying that as a legislator, I really want to center the needs of working families, knowing that we are actually fighting for our future. We're fighting for a livable Hawaii and a livable planet, and that each of these issue areas is so key to making sure that our keiki can not only afford to live here, but can actually live and enjoy clean air and clean water and be healthy. And so thanks for the kind of big zoom out of, you know, all the work that we have to do. We have our work cut out for us, but I really feel that if we ground ourselves in our community, the expertise and knowledge that each of our community members brings, we can kind of get through it together.
Thank you very much. All right, Greg, your statement, please, your closing statement.
Needed to unmute myself. Thank you, Lila, very much. On behalf of the Kokua Council, I want to thank both candidates for participating today. We appreciate your time again. This is the second time you've been with us to answer our questions, and we hope that this forum will help voters make the best decision when voting. I want to thank our directors for their work to organize these forums, and Lila Mower, especially for moderating. She's done quite a few of these. We hope you can join us for upcoming candidate forums, and please watch for updates at the Kokua Council Facebook page. Mahalo.